The Iranian nuclear deal reached over the weekend was the result of secret negotiations between the United States and Iran that began in March of this year. We also learned Monday that the U.S. told Israel of the talks in September and will not apologize for their success. Colin Campbell has more on these new developments from our Washington bureau. Hi, Colin.
Hi, Debbie. Much like we learned about how much the Obama administration knew about the beleaguered Affordable Care Act website, we're learning a little bit more information about how much time went into play when trying to factor in these negotiations with Iran. Now, the Associated Press seems to be taking the lead on this story, and they say as far back as in March, members of the State Department and President Obama's cabinet traveled to Oman to meet with Iranian officials over negotiations over its nuclear program. Of course, the case here is that many believe that Iran is trying to make their nuclear program and its technology into a weapons form. And of course, Israel seems to be one of the countries most concerned by Iran's progress in enriching its uranium. So throughout the year, which is estimated to be about at least 5 separate times, there have been meetings with upper officials here in the U.S. and Iranian officials over negotiations and curbing back Iran's nuclear program. So far, negotiations stand where Iran would have access to $7 billion in funds that have been restricted from it because of sanctions in exchange for paring back its enrichment program. This would mean that, of course, their weapons would not reach a weapons grade, which is widely feared that this was the goal for Iran. But at the same time, it would still be allowed to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. This is the objectives that Iranian officials have said for quite some time now, that their nuclear program has been for peaceful purposes only. Now, as you said before, the president did meet with Prime Minister of Israel in September. Shortly after that, the president did inform some of its 5 closest allies, Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia, as to the extent of the negotiations and their objectives. As you said before, the U.S. is not apologizing, even though it doesn't seem to be the most ideal negotiations for Israel at this point.
All right, we have plenty more to say about this, but Colin, thank you so much for the update. We do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The EU said Monday that economic sanctions against Iran could be lifted as early as December as part of the 6-month deal reached over the weekend. To help explain the deal, the author of Containing Iran, Strategies for Addressing the Iranian Nuclear Challenge is Robert Reardon. He joins us from the International Security Program at the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government via Skype. Dr. Reardon, thank you so much for being with us on Rise America. I do appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Well, as quickly as it was announced that this deal had been reached, albeit temporary, the criticism came out in full force, not the least of which was from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, has said that the terms are too soft. But let's start with what's good about this deal.
Well, I think a lot of things are good about the deal. The deal itself is on the whole good, and I think that to evaluate it, you have to weigh it against the other available options. And the United States and its partners really didn't have that many choices. The deal's not perfect, but it's better than anything else that could have feasibly been gotten. You know, that having been said, I think even in absolute terms, it's a pretty good deal. It puts a cap on uranium enrichment. They're not going to be able to increase their stocks of enriched uranium beyond where they are now. They're giving up enrichment of 20% uranium. And really, even most importantly, are the transparency measures. We're going to have daily access to the declared nuclear facilities in Iran by IAEA inspectors, and we are going to get actually access to facilities where centrifuges are manufactured and assembled, something that we didn't have in the past, access to a lot of sites and information on sites that we didn't have before. And I think that's really the most important guarantee that we're going to have against any sort of a nuclear breakout.
Of course, these talks have been ongoing over a period of time, and of course the sanctions have only gotten stricter over time. There was a deal almost put into place in 2004, and that fell apart. I guess my question for you is, how motivated is Iran to actually comply with the terms of this deal?
I think that they're very motivated to comply with the terms of this deal. The big question is what's going to happen after 6 months. So 6 months from now, or 6 months whenever the clock starts ticking and this plan is in place, that's the time that they're going to have to come up with some sort of deeper agreement, because this is only an interim deal. Sanctions can be put back. Iran can go back to producing its 20% stocks. It can go back to introducing new centrifuges. And that's what's going to happen if we can't come up with some sort of a deal in the next 6 months. My biggest concern would be that Iran decides it's not going to get anything better than this, or it can't get anything better than this, and says, we're going to adhere to some components of this deal over the longer term, and we're not going to continue the cap, but we're going to allow the greater transparency to the program, et cetera, et cetera. And the United States would be in a bind where I think it would be difficult to convince countries like Russia and China to put sanctions back or to continue the existing sanctions, and then it would really be a difficult position for the United States and its allies.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the next thing I was going to ask you, and that is, could this temporary deal paint the U.S. In a box in this regard? I also want to ask you, if you want to respond to that, is the things that could derail a permanent deal, and there are a lot of people that are quite incredulous that a permanent deal can be reached. What are some of the sticking points that really still have to be addressed before something permanent can be put in place?
Well, we have a lot of people on the right in the United States, and we have allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia that aren't going to be content unless Iran gives up uranium enrichment entirely, or at least gives it up to such a degree that it's just left with a very token capability. I can't imagine under any circumstances the Iranians agreeing to that. And so one concern that I would have is if the United States feels that it has to continue to maintain a very hard line and pushes for something very close to Iran, essentially giving up its uranium enrichment, in which case I don't think we're going to get a deal. The other thing that could happen, of course, is Congress could balk. If Congress decides that for whatever reason it's going to pass new sanctions, and even if it passes new sanctions legislation that says that the sanctions don't actually go into effect for 6 months until the interim deal is done, I think that by itself is something that could derail not only a potential deal in 6 months, but could derail this agreement.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, President Obama has vowed to veto anything that Congress passed if they do try to increase the sanctions. We're going to stop the conversation right here. But Robert Riordan, as always, it's good to see you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is sending a national security team to the United States to discuss the agreement, which Netanyahu called a historic mistake. For more on the Israeli reaction, Laura Burdon joins us from Jerusalem via Skype. Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for being on Rise America.
Yes, essentially, Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have shifted his opinion in, he's now sending the National Security Advisor, Yossi Cohen, over to the U.S. to engage in talks with President Obama concerning the Iranian issue. So many Israelis believe actually that one of the greatest fears of the government is that they're going to be relatively isolated in terms of the rhetoric between the superpower countries now concerning the issue of Iran. But furthermore, Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement to say that, he's not willing to shift his opinion when it comes to the Iranian issue, when it comes to them shutting down all of their main centrifuges in terms of Iranian enrichment. And they now want to be there every step of the way. So it's not just looking at an interim agreement with the Iranian government, but to actually, close this deal. Now, the Israeli government did say that it was a huge mistake for the countries to agree on this term agreement. And they stated that part of the issue is that they're now lifting many of the sanctions on Iran, and they're releasing a significant amount of money by essentially releasing this pressure. This could allow Iran to jump through some loopholes and actually open other types of nuclear reactor factories. So, in Israeli press this morning, one of the fears is that they could open a plutonium factory, which, part of this agreement would allow them to actually go ahead and do. So, at the moment they're keeping a very close eye, and, like I said, they're sending in their national security advisor, to the US. So, we'll continue to let you know what they're saying about this.
Burdon reporting for us from Israel. Thank you so much, Laura. The Iran deal is